There are moments when a single experience reveals a problem much bigger than one person. For Daniel Reed, that moment began with a hotel reservation. Daniel was a successful attorney known for taking difficult civil rights cases. He was also blind. For years, he had learned how to navigate a world designed mostly for people who could see. Airports, restaurants, office buildings, everyday tasks required planning, patience, and constant adaptation. Still, Daniel rarely complained. Until one business trip changed everything. Late one evening, after a delayed flight and hours of travel, Daniel arrived at a luxury hotel in a major city. The place marketed itself as the perfect view. That slogan was everywhere, on the website, in advertisements, in giant lettering outside the building. The perfect view. At first, it sounded harmless. But the moment Daniel entered the hotel, problems started appearing one after another. The digital check-in kiosks had no audio accessibility. The elevator buttons lacked proper tactile markings. The room controls relied entirely on touchscreens, with no voice assistance. Even emergency instructions were displayed only visually. Everywhere Daniel turned, the hotel seemed designed around sight, and only sight. By midnight, frustration had turned into something deeper. Not anger, exhaustion. The exhaustion of constantly being reminded that accessibility was treated like an afterthought. But one detail bothered him more than anything else: the hotel's name itself. The perfect view. To most people, it was just branding. To Daniel, it symbolized an attitude deeply rooted in society, that experiences centered around sight were considered the perfect standard, and everyone else was expected to adapt. That night, sitting alone in the dark hotel room, Daniel made a decision that would soon make national headlines. He wasn't just going to file a complaint. He was going to challenge the entire idea behind the business itself.
At first, nobody took the lawsuit seriously. When news broke that a blind attorney was suing a hotel chain over accessibility and branding concerns, social media exploded with jokes and criticism. People accused him of overreacting. Others claimed he was attacking language itself. But Daniel's legal argument was far more complex than headlines suggested. He argued that the issue was not simply the name, it was the philosophy behind it. The hotel had built an entire customer experience around visual exclusivity, while advertising itself as universally luxurious and welcoming. According to the lawsuit, the company failed to provide equal usability for visually impaired guests, despite presenting itself as fully modern and accessible. Daniel pointed to dozens of examples. Menus impossible to read without assistance, navigation systems inaccessible to screen readers, decorative lighting that made orientation difficult for partially sighted guests. Even room service ordering systems depended entirely on visual interfaces. The lawsuit quickly grew larger than one hotel. Advocacy groups began discussing a bigger issue: how many businesses claim to be inclusive while unintentionally excluding millions of people. The public debate intensified. Some people saw Daniel as a troublemaker. Others saw him as someone finally forcing society to confront invisible barriers. And as media coverage spread, the hotel chain made a critical mistake. Instead of addressing the concerns seriously, executives publicly mocked the lawsuit during an interview. That interview changed everything. Because now the case was no longer just legal. It became personal. Behind closed doors, discussions lasted for weeks. The hotel chain initially offered financial compensation. Daniel refused. Money had never been the point. He demanded structural changes, accessible redesigns, inclusive technology upgrades, mandatory disability awareness training, and one final request that shocked everyone involved. He wanted the hotel to change its name. Executives called the demand absurd,
But Daniel explained his reasoning carefully. The phrase, "the perfect view," represented more than marketing. It reflected a mindset that unconsciously prioritized sight as the ideal human experience. To him, true hospitality should never define perfection through a single ability. The negotiations became tense. Lawyers argued late into the night. PR teams warned executives that refusing compromise could worsen public backlash. Finally, after mounting pressure, the company agreed to a settlement. The hotel chain would implement major accessibility reforms across all locations. And incredibly, they agreed to rebrand the flagship hotel. The announcement stunned the public. Some celebrated the decision as historic progress. Others criticized it as corporate surrender. But regardless of opinion, one thing was undeniable. The lawsuit had forced a global conversation few businesses could ignore anymore. Months later, the hotel reopened under a new name: the Open Welcome. The redesign included voice-assisted technology, tactile navigation systems, accessible digital interfaces, and staff training programs developed with disability advocates. The changes extended beyond legal compliance. They changed the philosophy of the business itself. Daniel never described the outcome as a victory over a hotel. He described it as proof that accessibility should not be treated as charity or special treatment. It should be considered normal. The case inspired other industries to reevaluate their own systems. Tech companies improved accessibility tools. Restaurants redesigned menus. Architects reconsidered how spaces communicate with different senses. And perhaps most importantly, the conversation around disability began shifting away from limitation and toward inclusion. Because the lawsuit was never truly about blindness. It was about perspective, about who gets included when society defines comfort, beauty, and perfection, and about what happens when someone refuses to quietly accept exclusion disguised as normality. One person walked into a hotel feeling invisible, and walked out having changed how thousands of businesses thought about accessibility forever. Sometimes the most powerful vision comes from the people society assumes cannot see at all.